Well, hello, everybody. It's time for DevOps Breakfast. It's our regular show all about digital innovation and DevOps, of course. I'm your co-host, Gina Smith.
I'm Michael Araneta.
And today we have a really cool guest, I think. He was in data before there was a DataOps. He's based in Melbourne. He is the general manager of information management at Metabank. And that should be really interesting because he's really turned things around over there.
Right, and Medibank is one of the largest insurance providers in the world, private health insurance in the world. They do everything from underwriting to funds distribution and then to distribution of insurance as well. Very interesting conversation we'll have with him.
Yeah, what's interesting is they're the second largest with almost 27% market share there in Australia, but they started out as a company, a private company. So they were privatized a few years ago and then put on the market. And so it's very interesting.
And it would be very interesting, obviously, to talk about the DataOps requirements for what traditionally has been seen as a very boring industry of insurance as well. And I do recognize that we have to talk about the implications of data for insurance, especially when you've got health concerns because of COVID. And obviously, there are new data points that they really have to take a look at.
Yeah, but I'm going to try not to use the word premiums ever.
All right. Yeah.
That word just always, ugh. But he should be a great guest, especially since IDC has been predicting pretty steadily, I think, over the last couple of years, that the amount of data is just exploding. It's supposed to shoot up to, zettabytes of data by 2025, a 32% CAGR on that.
It's very hard to keep track of the growth rates, but this is predictions futurescape season at IDC. Very busy time for us. I'm sure that you enjoy this, Gina, this time of the year when we really look at what do we define the future to be? What do you have in terms of predictions?
Yeah, well, just let me presage that with, normally we do the news right now, if you're a regular listener, but this time it's all about the futurescape predictions. So at IDC, Mike, you have to tell me how many there are. There must be a couple of dozen sectors of 10 predictions each. So from cloud to AI, to the two I worked on, DevOps and the future of digital innovation. You're doing stuff on finance and insurance and that sector. And so we can't share all, whatever it is, 150 predictions with you. But we thought we could just put a couple on screen so you can kind of just get a taste. And maybe we'll do another show about all this.
And this is part of the Futurescape set of documents that we publish towards the end of the year as we look at the next 12 months. Very interesting time for us, obviously. So what do you have in terms of your key predictions, Gina?
Yeah, and they even go beyond just the next 12 months. I was surprised to see that. They predict some of them all the way out to 2024. So one I wanted to focus on is one I'm putting on screen right now, and that is this. That the economy accelerates on its digital destiny with at least 65% of Asia-Pacific GDP digitalized by 2022. 65%. That's in Asia. And it will drive $1.2 trillion, the US, of direct digital transformation investments from 20 to 23. So basically, every company is going to have to be a software company to compete.
Right. And I also wonder how exactly they're going to structure this new type of organization within traditional companies, traditional industries as well. There definitely will have to be a new way of how we work together as we try to pursue more and more of this digital transformation programs.
That's right. Especially in Asia, I mean, the whole idea of acting more like a digital native software company is you have a quasi-flat organization and everybody is always experimenting and revving and failing together, succeeding together. And that's not often the case in Asia, right? Where our companies are a lot more top down, especially in banking and finance, right? Which you cover. And so, I know this prediction is made and many companies are saying, oh yeah, we'll be software companies, but this is going to be easier said than done. And it'll be very interesting to follow the obstacles they encounter along the
Right.
way.
You definitely can talk about changing the way of work, changing the way that you collaborate. But if your DNA is really in this traditional companies, then it's really hard to make this happen.
Yeah, you can't just say, oh, we're going to, from now on, build everything on the cloud, on microservices. We're going to go cloud native. We're going to use agile integration. It's not enough, right? It's as much about reteaming as it is about retooling and reprocessing. I mean, it's
Yeah.
a big makeover, but with the COVID epidemic, or rather pandemic, now in its closing phases, it seems, here in Asia, you know, that's got to be accelerated. Now is the
Yeah.
right time.
Yeah. The ability of the organization to work with external third parties is also a key thing, a key trend that we are keeping track of, especially with this Futurescape documents. For financial services, for example, we have been talking about how 50% of insurers worldwide will work with at least 3 insurtechs. That was a prediction that we had last year, and it would be good to validate this with Medibank, obviously, but they are pursuing this collaboration. They really look at changing core insurance systems, insurance companies by 2022. 25% of global tier 1 insurers will be on their way to this new path to core insurance systems working with third parties. This is essential because they will be acquiring all these capabilities from the outside world and then integrating this back to their core systems.
And so really building ecosystems instead of just one-to-one, I buy a package from Oracle or whoever, right? Instead of consuming the software, you're developing it and you're sourcing it from this outside bevy of partners and users.
Yeah,
Like
and we're
Ford.
talking about the way that we are going to create ecosystems that is really focused on the customer. We're talking about ecosystems of health, which would be very topical, especially for our guest today. We're talking about entertainment, transport, logistics, retail, obviously, and the telecommunications ecosystems that would be emerging very quickly in the region.
Yeah, and all that's got to be secure, which brings us into another prediction I thought I'd share with everybody here. We're predicting that by 2023, 60% of Asian 1000 organizations will shift security left. That means earlier in the development process so that security can engage with DevOps teams to review application architecture, release plans, and hopefully even earlier from the ad hoc planning station. Well, security has never been more important.
Yeah.
COVID made that certain.
Yeah. One of the key concerns around security, obviously, is how we are going to plan for security when we do not know what threats we are fighting against. There is this evolution of all of these cyber threats. Obviously, I think there are cyber criminal syndicates that really try to look at vulnerabilities in our systems.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, because threat modeling has got to be good, and that's a manual thing. That's not one of those automated DevSecOps things where you sit in a room and you try to think, I'm a hacker, what is the weakest thing that I could possibly think of? I mean, because hackers are already always experimenting with new ways to get into your software that take a experimental approach to your software development is a recommendation I find myself giving over and over again. And there are board games to help people on the team outside of security think in this way. There's a DevSecOpoly. It's a Monopoly game, but all about security. And you go around, and it's technical, and it has all the possible threats, and you try to get around them. There's another game too that's more like a card game, and you play it with 4 people. One of our enterprises, so
Yeah.
they rely heavily on board
So
games.
who wins in these games? Well, I think especially in insurance, you see a lot of these new ways that they are acquiring technology capabilities. One of them, obviously, in security, especially because this has implications to the data privacy of individuals. In Australia, there is this emergence of consumer data rights, where the consumer has clearly owned his or her data and would have a lot of control about the utilization of that particular data. This is also important for another prediction that we have in IDC Financial Insights. We say that by 2023, 75% of lending decisions on retail banking will be supported by fintech propositions. So there you go again,
Wow.
fintech participating in what is core to the banking industry, which is lending. This underscores the acceleration of bank fintech collaboration so that all these fintech propositions will be able to help in everything from underwriting to distribution to services and collection, which would be a very important topic, especially as we look at a credit crisis that seems to be impending.
Yeah, and that one's really monumental in a way. I didn't see that even trend in any of the predictions last year, not that high. Anyway,
Yeah.
so
We're talking about all these ways by which we are communicating to consumers about adverse scenarios, especially on delinquencies, non-performing loans. We have to be a lot more gentle in the way that we speak to customers, especially around these very tricky, but also very personal stuff around delinquencies.
And so, everything we're talking about digital innovation seems to boil down to some ops or another, doesn't it? Like DevOps, DevSecOps, we focus so much on.
There is this profusion of everything ops these days. I was speaking to someone on risk ops, for example. AI ops seems to be very topical too. So there's this, I think, too much ops these days, which actually speaks of all these integration work that we really have to be doing for the best organizations in the world.
Yeah, I truly like a plethora of names and not a lot of understanding what all these are and stuff. Well, that's what we're here for, right? And DataOps, which is the expertise of our next guest, Craig Rollins. He's the general manager of information management at Metabank. He has been in data since before there was a DataOps. And so he's going to join us any second here and we'll say hello to him. But I'm really psyched to hear him. He has a really interesting background.
And
is that him?
Craig is here.
Craig, hey.
Hi, Gina. Hi, Michael. How are you?
We're great. Thanks for joining us on this. Boy, do you have an interesting bio online. I'm a former journalist and I just researched the heck out of you. It says that you can memorize or all the passwords you've ever had. Is that true?
I'm in data, so we generally, I don't know what it is, but we generally have a good memory for numbers. I have a bad memory for other things. I couldn't tell you what record was sung in what year, anything of that nature. But numbers, I'm very good with.
See, I could tell you every lyric that Robert Plant ever sang verbatim and would argue with you, but I can't remember my passwords sometimes from, day to day.
I can't tell you what I ate for breakfast. That's the only contribution I have to this genius
really,
that we are.
Yes. Okay, so I've still got my service number running around my head.
Right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so still in Melbourne, Victoria, coming out of lockdown. If you've heard any of the global news, so yeah, slowly but surely we're getting back to normality.
That's happening here too. We're bouncing back a lot. I mean, here in Hong Kong, schools are open. My son's playing basketball again. Everyone wears masks, of course, but it's generally under control. You too, right? Thailand's doing great, Michael.
But yes, Thailand is doing great, but are we also getting back to normal? Or what is the normal that we're getting back to? Craig, and I think in a recent video podcast that you were doing, you mentioned that you think that you'll have to work even if it's possible to work in the office, to work some time off, maybe 2-3 days a week?
Yeah, and I think that's changing, right? For individuals, and using our team as an example, many of them don't want to go back to the office 5 days a week anyway. So call it the new COVID normal. They would prefer a day or two at least at home to focus on things that they need to, rather than have interruptions in the office. So it's kind of a mix. Socially, it's good to see people, talk face to face, even have those corridor conversations. And conversely to that, have that quiet time at home. And remember, most data individuals are quite introverted, so they're quite happy spending that time, headphones on, perhaps music going through, coding away, right? So they love that element. the paradigm will be, before people like to have Friday and Mondays off from the office, I actually see people wanting to go back to the office on Fridays so they can do more social things leading into the weekend. So I think that's the paradigm.
Oh, that's interesting. I see that happening too. I probably only go to the office on Fridays, and that's part of it. I know that one of your core, well, first we should say what you do at Metabank, because you kind of marry thought leadership and business goals with that data processing and automating all of that and putting it in the cloud. Did I get that right?
I'd say yes. On pure numbers, I look after 3.9 petabytes of data on behalf of Medibank and our various brands. So fairly sizable. Warehouses, a couple of them, both local and cloud, but predominantly cloud. And you're right, it's towards an outcome that services our customers, right? So better health for better Australians is what we're looking for. And Medibank desires to do that through data. So it's a great place for me to be.
You wrote an article about you had a cardiac thing happen to you. You went to the hospital, and I was kind of moved by it because you said, wow, now you were seeing the company through the customer's eyes, and it really caused a shift because when you're laying there in a bed, it's personal.
Very much so. Look, predominantly I've been in banking, finance, and insurance from industry's perspective. So much of that even is personal in its own way. So providing somebody a mortgage is really about their dream home. Providing somebody a loan is about maybe their new boat or a lifestyle event. So it is still quite personal, but health it takes that obviously to a new level, right? So, for me and the heart condition that was found and the outcomes that have come off the back of that, I learned very quickly that you need insight, because I wanted to know who the best cardiothoracic surgeon was going to be, who was going to do it, what type of surgery, be it traditional or robotic, as an example, what the recovery was going to be, and could I get back to the same physical outcomes that I was doing prior to surgery, or would it be more restrictive? So, I put myself very much in a customer's viewpoint of that's happening to me. How do I get the best outcome for it? And now I can utilize that to say, how do I get the best outcomes for Medibank's customers going forward?
What is the change that you have introduced, especially after this incident, and in terms of DataOps?
In terms of DataOps, the incident has had a profound change on me from a lifestyle perspective. And by the way, it was an hereditary condition, so it wasn't specifically a lifestyle one. I don't smoke. I'm quite fit and healthy, or I like to think I am, even for my age. So all of those kind of things, I believe I was doing well anyway.
Your
but it wasn't hereditary.
Pictures are all over the web.
Yeah.
Well,
which is good news and not so good news in some cases.
Yeah.
So yes, and the fact is, I'm actually running faster than I was prior to. So I look at it, if I use the heart as an engine, as an example, I was 75% proficient before, and now 100% proficient, because that valve is actually working well where it wasn't working well before. So if you think about things that are flying well in the engine, because of that, I'm running faster, I'm running longer, I'm recovering quicker. So all of those things are happening from that point of view. Michael, to turn that to DataOps, where our thought process and where I've accelerated our thought processes are things like automated testing rather than manual testing, blowing away non-production environments, but having them in standardized templates, providing outcomes using IoT services, sensors, etc., and providing that information to our customers via our applications so they can understand more. And everybody's got them, right? The app for sleeping better, checking their blood pressure, how much coffee are they drinking, how many steps are they doing, what does that mean for them in terms of their health and well-being? Well, that's where data comes in.
How is that? And along the way, you reduce time to market and cost of delivery. And I mean, just by introducing that statistical link into the data ops process.
Yeah, Gina, in terms of either benefits provided to Medibank or savings made, and I'm going to call that productivity, over the course of the last 3 years, which has been I've been at Medibank, we've been able to provide Medibank in terms of just data and DataOps, $6 million worth of saving. Now, I think it's a great figure, but based on the plans that we've got on our roadmap, we want to take that to 10 million over the course of 5 years. Now that's a fantastic return on investment, first of all. And then if you think about the uplifting capability off the back of it, so you've got a win-win scenario there of the two of them. Add the third dimension, which is the bit that we love, is we've actually reduced risk as well. So you reduce risk, you increase productivity, and obviously return on investment, and you increase capability. Who wouldn't want that?
Yeah, and I guess it's all driven by the team, having your team all skilled up, and the quality of the data. I mean, dirty data is something I hear at every conference. You know, that's the dirty word, is dirty data.
Data quality obviously would be a very big issue, especially when you look at the need for current reliable data. And of course, when you look at health of individuals, you're looking at as current a data as possible. How big is this a challenge in terms of data quality?
It's always a challenge, Michael. It doesn't matter which industry, and it doesn't matter which company. And there are dimensions that you've already talked about. Timeliness, which is one of them. No. Completeness and accuracy are two other ones, right? So that's data quality. So from our perspective, working with one of our strategic partners, TCS, we built a data ingestion framework. That's just one example, and that's got completeness checks. So we already know that what left a source system landed in a data warehouse. Now that's great, but what we've also added as a dimension onto that is what we expected to come through based on historic numbers by using analysis tells us that we've got the right information coming through. Because if 50,000 records left a source system and 50,000 records landed in a warehouse, most people go, oh, that's okay. But actually, what if you were expecting 500,000 and you only got 50,000? So it's not okay, right? So we add that dimension into it, and that gives us those completeness checks. And then you add accuracy over the top of that at a granular level. Then you get to resolve for critical reports. And back to Gina's point, you know, garbage in is garbage out. You don't make informed decisions, which means you don't do the right thing on behalf of your customer. If you add completeness and accuracy together, plus the timeliness, which is the speed to market, you get great outcomes from a shareholder point of view, but your customers get an even better outcome.
But you also have considerations for, you also have considerations for consent, especially in Australia, where you've got consumer data rights, data protection, data privacy, very big issues, obviously. How do you really include this filter, this big filter of consent?
Well, Australia legislates that, doesn't it? I thought Australia had the toughest insurance rules in the world.
They're fairly stringent, I'll say that. And obviously in the industry that we're in, of course, you know, we need to be using, so if you use the Australian privacy principles, and there's 13 of them, you need to be using the data for the reasons in which you collected it in the first place, right? That's the first thing. And you clearly need the customer's approval. So for us and using the data, the first thing that we do is we segregate when we bring the data in sensitive and non-sensitive information, right? So that's the first thing. So you've already reduced the amount of individuals who can be using it, and it's only the individuals who need to use it.
Buckets.
That's right, for the purposes that they need it. Yeah, absolutely, Gina. So that's the first thing, right? So you do that split, and then you use the use case. So is it used for specific claims outcomes? Okay, so it's a claims outcome. Is it used for a particular treatment? So using the example of some of ours, we've got at-home outcomes. So people can have chemotherapy at home, dialysis at home, and you actually have to excuse the pun, but cardiac rehab, so it's close to my heart, at home, right? So virtual cardiac rehab. And they're only allowed to be collated and used for those specific outcomes. It can't be used for alternative outcomes. And a simple example of that would be on our application, and prior to COVID and obviously post-COVID, we did park runs. And one of those park runs would be park runs where you could bring your pet along, your dog along. We also sell pet insurance, but we wouldn't dream of using the information we collate from the park run with the pets to try and sell them pet insurance, because that's not the right reasoning, Michael.
Right. Wouldn't be ethical. And if you're trying to be customer centric, you put yourself in that customer's mind and, ooh, what a bad feeling. Thanks for letting me bring Lola, but my God, now you're selling me dog food. And
Exactly. And it's
yeah.
not
Yeah,
really the right outcome.
And back to the principle of currency, obviously, of current data, how do you look at making sure that your consent frameworks, especially for data privacy, are current too? Because people change their minds about this particular data can only be used for this purpose up to maybe 3 months, and then I change my mind
Right.
after 3 months.
Yeah, so Michael, and that has its own problems. I'm going to say that, right, for anybody in data. So in a live operation production environment, if an individual turns around and says, you know, I prefer that you don't use my data anymore, can you remove that? That's easy from a production point of view. It generally is, because that's even singular records is very easy to take out. But if you look at backups, snapshots, etc., you could potentially reintroduce that individual's information back into an operational outcome. So you also need to go into your backups, and you also need to go into your snapshots to completely remove that individual out of those areas. That's tough to do, right? So there's work to be done to automate those outcomes, to say this is the criteria we're looking for, this is how far back we would need to go in a snapshot or a backup, so we don't reintroduce that individual, and we don't inadvertently use them for such things as, you know, marketing for that Live Better app. So they're tough to do. That takes some time. And by the way, using DataOps or DevOps, we produced iterative outcomes to get to where we need to be.
Yeah, and that's a good place to put this in. I think a lot of people confuse data ops a little bit with DevOps, because like DevOps, it unites IT and development, but it's got this extra thing, the statistical analysis that really looks at the full life cycle of the data that comes in and comes out.
Absolutely agreed. Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah,
Agile, right? It's agile, it's lean, it borrows on those continuous improvement principles.
Yeah, very much so, right? So the agile principles, definitely. So even if you think about the teams makeup, traditionally in data teams, might have had an ETL developer, you'd have had a tester, you've had a data analyst, you might have had what they call a BI person, or now, you know, colloquially known as a sort of data visualization individual, and then you'd have this team kind of offset governing them, which is your data steward. Now, what we're trying to do with these teams that we're putting together, and obviously in the agile world, train squads and many other names that they've given them, the ETL developer can cross-train the tester and vice versa. Now that means two people can do two roles, right? Any one of those two. And then if you had data visualization in it, if you had business requirements gathering and data analysis in there, and then data visualization, you can effectively give any piece of data work to a singular individual and they could do all of it. Right, before you had these silos, and obviously that made increased processes. When you talk about speed to market, that's gone with those purposes, right? It's a very different outcome. So that's the first one. I mean,
Yeah,
the
you've
second,
really gotten rid of the silos. I mean, I thought you were very far ahead. I mean, many of the banks we talk to here are just beginning to get rid of the silos. You've got one team, right?
yep.
And one team, like a team that would be in the pit at a race car, at a car race.
And that's it. And Gina, they're all cross-skilled, right? So cross-skilling those unique skills gives that agile approach, provides a faster outcome, but also, if you think about the individual, provides a variety of work.
Well, that makes them happier, right? Because they're not
less
bored
bored.
of doing the same thing every day, you know, and that makes a
Yeah,
difference.
it makes a huge difference for them. And they get different things each time. And they could work on a health insurance query one day, but they could work on a health services one. So, as I said, you know, bringing information through for chemotherapy at home and bringing that information through is very different to maybe premium review of a health insurance. But as I said, that's the variety that they've got, and they can do all of that. So one day you might say to them, actually, I just want you to utilize the ingestion framework for a new source system coming in. And the next time you might turn around and say to them, actually, I'd like you to build a telephony dashboard for one of our health services clients. They're very different outcomes there, right? And very different skill sets, but also a great deal of variety and lots of learning.
That's really exciting.
But there's also something to say about the use of data throughout the enterprise, right? Because everything is data these days as well. So how do you move from this sort of centralized, although multi-skilled type of construct, and make sure that all these disciplines around data would be used throughout the enterprise as well?
Good question.
Yeah, Michael, that is a good question. So look, the first thing, and we want to make it a one-stop shop first of all, right? So any consumers of that information, we're bringing them to, and there's no secret here, we're on out at AWS, but it's a cloud data warehouse. So the first thing, as you said, it's an enterprise one. So we want it to be multi-usage, right? Because that's where you get the value of the data, first of all. You also get people coming consistently for the same data, and it's got that stamp of approval. So remembering what I said earlier about the completeness and the accuracy checks, there's a level where they say, okay, we know that that's great, so we can make informed business decisions. And then the second part behind that is, once we've got that platform, which tools do we utilize to get to the outcome that we're looking for, and how do we skill those individuals up who are using those skills? Because using those tools gets, again, consistency of outcome. So, for us, we would love analytics individuals, as an example, if they're looking at machine learning outcomes, to use AWS SageMaker, because that will give them a better outcome. And we skill those individuals up in being able to do so they get the best outcomes. And from a reporting point of view, our main tool set is Tableau. So they can build consistent dashboards and outcomes utilizing that information. Again, enterprise level. And Michael, to move on from that, if you standardize the dashboard template, it's almost I was not going to say a complete copy, but it's almost a copy and paste for a telephony dashboard to a claims dashboard to something else. All you're suggesting is you're giving them fresh insight into a different area.
And by scaling the experience to everyone, it's not all scattered in heebie-jeebie.
No, Gina, and also you're giving them skill sets around data literacy. So even those at a lowest ebb, you're beginning to talk them through data, right? So if you think about things like simple records management, this is how we create a record. This is how we maintain a record. This is how we make sure access is done properly. These are the controls we've got. This is how long we retain it for, because this is a legal obligation. And this is, by the way, how we should be securely disposing of information. Yeah, so they get to understand all of that as they go through, because you need, at the lowest level of granularity is your weakest point. That's where your data breach comes. So you need to be able to continue educating your user community.
Yeah, and constantly experimenting with ways to block them, because Michael and I were just talking about this, because hackers are for sure always experimenting, and so you need that culture of experimentation as part of it.
They are, but you see, I mean, using some of the tools that we've got at the moment. So AWS recommend things like multi-factor authentication, right? So it's not just a straight key in of a password, and obviously that password changes on a periodic basis. But generally, you now see a second code maybe to your phone that says you need to put in this 6-digit number over this 30-second time period alongside your password before you can get in. Now that's very difficult for hackers to get into. You make sure that you encrypt the data both in flight and at rest as well. So whether it's going over the net or whether it's actually physically in the data store. So there are a number of data security measures that we do put in place. We also align to AWS's well-architected framework, which has a security component to it, as well as process optimization, operational efficiency, reliability in there as well, and then cost optimization. So it's got those 5 pillars, security being the main one.
Do you foresee any problems or challenges in keeping this up? I mean, 3 years ago, you came in and it was all legacy and you moved it all to the cloud and have these terrific results, $6 million and everything. Well, now much, much more data is coming down the pike, right? I think we said it's going to go up by 32% by 2025. How do you scale what you've done to keep doing it? I guess I'm asking that.
That's the great news of cloud, first of all. So it's elastic. So, my view for many people, concertina, in and out, as and when you need it, right? So for me, you scale out as and when you need, and that means either more processing, more storage, or anything like that. And you scale in as and when you don't. And I use the non-production, non-operation environments as an example. When you don't need them, blow them away, right? Gone. And because cloud is consumption based, if you're not using them, you've kept the cost down. So as soon as you finished the project, the test environment, get rid of it. If you need wider on, and I use AWS as the example, but if you need wider on that, then determine where the pricing tiering is. So if it's just on S3, that's great. It's on, but what if you want it to be something that you're not using on demand? So you only use it every now and again. And I use a perfect case in principle. When we were looking at decision modeling at ANZ Bank, by the way, people only look at the last 2 years. So anything past the last 2 years should really be off demand. So you can put that in Glacier or Deep Glacier, and you can get more cost-effective storage solutions. And that's the beauty of, although we're scaling out, we're using more and more data, how do you do it cost-effectively?
You got to stay on top of it.
All the time. All the time.
You're never taking your eye off that ball. That's fascinating. It's really interesting stuff. Michael, you have anything else?
Yeah, and you are looking at another 4 million to go to in terms of additional cost savings. Where will this come from?
Yeah, the 4 million for us is still further consolidation work. So, and we believe that because of the way that we've got the storage at the moment, we can make further savings in those areas, right? So that for us, the beauty is purely on savings. I've mentioned 3.9 petabytes, so that gives us a fair amount of storage and savings to have a look at, which is good outcomes. Some of the applications that we've got are still legacy, so we're still coming off some of those and we're condensing some of those down. So 4 million is a good outcome. If I think of DataOps and the way that we're continuing to do things, we increase the amount of automated testing that we're doing. We reduce the amount of test environments and we clear those down. But other things are helping us, right? So using the metadata toolset, AWS Glue, for us, that used to be hourly charge, is now minute charge. So you can see that there's obviously a vast reduction in cost savings in there. The completeness and accuracy checks that we're bringing through, we don't need to bring as much data, but we need to make sure it's accurate. If we're doing that, we make better decisions. So again, better decisions increase revenue. So that's where we see these. And again, reduction in risk. So we've just come through another audit and we've got another green stamp of approval on that audit, which is a fantastic outcome for us. So those are all the mechanisms we use for that 4 million. I'll say that the work that the team are doing allows us to do so. Our team has actually shrunk in size, so we're delivering more with less people because of that agile approach as well. So there's another saving for us as well. It's not just about the technology, it's about the processes and about the people. So if you add all of those into the mix, that's where the savings come from.
Can you tell us before you leave what the nebula is behind you? Which nebula is it?
Yeah, Gina, so this is a Helix Nebula and it's in the Aquarius constellation. So I do hope you enjoy it. Most people have found it a fascinating talking piece when I come online, and I'll be happy to share further ones with you later on.
Oh, that'd be great. Send us a background. Maybe we'll have you back sometime and I'll get our own nebula. It has such a nice corona effect on you.
Yeah, they're not all like this, by the way, just so you know. When I picked this one first time around, just because of the effect it's got. But there are many different ones. I guess if you watch Marvel or Endgame or Guardians of the Galaxy, you can probably see a number of them there without even realizing that you are seeing a number of nebulas anyway.
Yeah, I'm such a Star Trek nerd. I never veer far from Star Trek, but there's
well, I hope you're enjoying Star Trek Discovery on Netflix then.
I am. I'm in Hong Kong. We get it. We're so excited to have that available to us here. This was great. Stay in touch with us, Craig. We'll stay in touch with you and let us know what's going down. We'd love to have you on again sometime talking more about data.
Thank you, Gina. Thank you.
And here's to more success to you, Craig and Medibank.
Yeah. Congratulations. Oh, and full disclosure, AWS is not a sponsor of this program. That was just Craig talking about it.
Yes, and look, and as I said, I mean, it's not just about AWS. We've got many partners in there as well. So TCS are certainly one of them where we can reduce our costs onshore and offshore. So, add all of those components in it. And thank you very much for inviting me. You've been very kind with your questioning, which is lovely. It's been a very enjoyable conversation, and I would love to keep in touch.
Right.
Yeah, thanks so much, Craig. We'll see you soon. And that's everybody for this week's episode of DevOps Breakfast. We hope to see you soon, and you can see all of our back episodes on our YouTube channel. I'm Gina Smith.
I'm Michael Araneta.
We'll see you next week.